I never should have gone down to the basement that night, but the trunk with my name on it called to me. What I found inside destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. The storm had been relentless, hammering against the windows, rattling the old house like it wanted to shake loose every secret it had been keeping. I had gone downstairs simply to check the boiler, something I did almost every week. But then I saw it, a section of the wall, slightly bulging, plaster cracked unevenly, hiding something I had never noticed before. Curiosity, stubborn and dangerous, took hold. I pressed my fingers against the wall, feeling the faint give of wood behind the plaster. With a grunt, I pushed. The wall shuddered and gave way, releasing the scent of damp earth and cedar. And there it was, a trunk, dark heavy, its iron hinges rusted with time, and etched on the top in careful, almost deliberate letters. Margaret Linton. I knelt before it, heart hammering. My hands shook as I traced the carving, feeling the years press down on me in that single intimate word. My children had always warned me about digging into old things, about asking questions better left alone. "Well, Mom, some doors aren't meant to be opened," my son had said one Christmas, his voice tight. But the door had opened itself, in a way calling me, daring me to see. The lock was old, stubborn. My late father's key fit perfectly, as if predestined. The click echoed louder than the storm, reverberating in my chest. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside were letters, photographs, documents I had never imagined. And at the center, a small box, unassuming yet beckoning. My hands trembled as I unfolded the first letter. Phew. My mother's handwriting stared back at me, urgent, careful, almost pleading. "Margaret," it began, "if you are reading this, then the time has come for you to know. Our family is not what it seems. There are things I have kept from you, things I thought would protect you, but protection has its price. Its price." I sank to the cold concrete floor, clutching the letter, heart racing. What could she have meant? My life, my family, the children who trusted me, had it all been built on a lie? And yet, as fear gripped me, a strange clarity emerged. The trunk had waited for me, silently, for decades. For decades. It was not just a container of secrets. It was a call to confront the truth, no matter how unbearable. I picked up a photograph. A young woman with my mother's eyes holding a baby. My breath caught. A child. Was this me? Someone like me? Or someone I should have known? The basement was eerily quiet now. The storm gone. Dust swirled faintly in the dim light, shadows stretching across the floor. I could hear the creak of the old house settling, whispering stories of generations past. My heart ached with the weight of things unseen, things unspoken, and yet I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Courage. I had to know. I had to uncover the truth, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew. And so I did. The moment I straightened up from the basement floor, clutching the photograph, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't alone in this house, not in the sense of someone watching me, but in the memories that seemed to press against the walls. And every shadow, every creak, every whisper of wind carried fragments of voices from the past. I could almost hear my mother, younger, warning me without words. I went through the letters next. One by one, each unfolded a story that didn't match the life I had been living. My father's letters were filled with caution and regret, but more than that, they hinted at betrayal, not of me, but of someone I didn't know I had been connected to. The dates confused me. They spanned decades, yet the names, the addresses, the tiny details, they all circled back to me. My hands shook as I read a sentence that made my stomach drop. "You were never meant to know, Margaret, but the truth has a way of finding its way home." I sank into the chair nearby, the damp air of the basement clinging to my skin. I felt the weight of the past pressing down, and for a moment, I considered abandoning it all, closing the trunk, plastering the wall back, pretending none of this existed. But something deeper, fiercer, pushed me onward. I had always believed knowledge was power. Now I realized it was also survival. As I sorted through the papers, one photograph slipped out, falling face down on the concrete floor. I flipped it over. It was my brother John, but not as I remembered him. He was younger, yes, but there was a look in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear, guilt, secrecy. Behind him was a woman I didn't recognize, holding a baby. My heartbeat quickened. Could this be? The thought barely formed before I grabbed the accompanying letter, and everything fell into place in a blur of confusion and pain. "John, you must remember what I told you. She cannot know." If she finds out, everything collapses. Everything collapsed. I sank back, my chest tight. My brother, my family, they weren't the people I thought I knew. The realization felt like a punch to the gut. Memories of small family gatherings, whispered conversations in corners, sudden phone calls that ended when I entered the room. All of them now carried a shadow I hadn't noticed before. I remember calling my son that evening, my hands trembling around the phone. I found something," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What kind of something, Mom?" he asked, concern immediately seeping through the line. I hesitated. How could I explain? Ye trunk, with my name on it. Letters, breaths, secrets. There was silence on the other end. Then softly he said, Be careful, Mom. Some things are better left buried." His words were meant as warning, but they steeled me. I realized that knowing the truth was not about comfort. It was about honesty, about reclaiming my own history before it was lost entirely. The next few days were a haze of discovery. Each item in that trunk peeled back a layer of our family's history, exposing fractures I hadn't known existed. I learned of a cousin I had never met, of financial decisions my father had made in secret, of mistakes and regrets my mother had carried like stones in her pockets. But the most shocking revelation, the one that made my hands shake and my heart pound, was the connection between my brother John and the child in the photographs. It was me, or someone who could have been me, a life that had been hidden, almost erased, tucked away behind walls and lies. And yet, the love of the family, the love I had known and cherished, had been real. But it had been complicated, entangled with choices I could barely comprehend. I began speaking aloud, as if the walls themselves needed to hear my voice. Why did you keep this from me?" I asked the air. Why did no one tell me the truth? The basement remained silent, but somehow in that quiet, I felt my mother's presence, her gentle reminder that people sometimes lie not to hurt, but to protect. And I began to understand the complexity of love. It is not always transparent, and it is not always easy. Then, a week later, I found the document that tied everything together, a ledger of names, dates, and hidden connections meticulously kept. My father had documented every person, every event, every secret, as though he had known I would find it one day. I stared at it, the ink smudged in places, the handwriting familiar and stern, and I realized this was a family legacy, not just of secrets, but of preservation. I remember sitting on the basement steps that evening, the storm outside having returned, rain tapping against the windows, and thinking about the irony of it all. Our family had been living in the same house, breathing the same air, yet whole histories had passed between us unnoticed, and now I was the keeper of it. I began talking to my grandchildren, carefully, slowly, threading the story into our daily life without overwhelming them. A family isn't just what we see, I told them one evening, their eyes wide, listening intently. It's also what we don't see, the choices people make when they think no one is looking. Secrets, mistakes, love, it all shapes who we are. It was strange, this duality of knowledge. I was both devastated and liberated. Devastated because of the betrayals, the hidden truths, the weight of lives that had been obscured. Liberated because now I could finally see our family whole in all its flawed, human, complicated beauty. One evening, as I carefully placed a letter back in the trunk, I noticed the key pendant resting in the small box. I picked it up and held it to my chest. My mother had placed it there, I realized, as a guide, a symbol that while secrets may be heavy, love and connection endure. I could feel her watching me, urging me forward, to confront the past, to make peace with it, to ensure that the next generation knew both the shadows and the light of our family. And so I resolved that the trunk would stay in the basement. Yes, but it would no longer be a tomb of secrets. It would be a teaching, a bridge between what was hidden and what must be known. That night, I lay in bed listening to the storm, thinking about the life I had lived and the truths I had uncovered. I realized that sometimes the hardest discoveries are the ones that define you. Sometimes the people you love most are capable of both great kindness and great concealment, and sometimes the only way to move forward is to accept both. The next morning, I went back to the basement, the light softer now, filtering through the small window, dust motes dancing in the air. I touched the trunk, feeling the carved letters, and whispered, I understand now, and I forgive. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't about forgetting. It's about acknowledging the complexity of life, embracing the truth, and choosing to carry love forward despite it all. So, the trunk remains there today, not as a container of betrayal, but as a testament to resilience, memory, and the enduring bonds of family. I never imagined that one more discovery could break my heart in ways the others hadn't. Yet there I was, crouched in front of the trunk again. Letters and photographs spread around me like shards of a fractured life. The air in the basement felt heavier tonight, thick with the weight of decades, and even the faint hum of the water heater seemed to pause, as if waiting for me to uncover the next truth. It started with a photograph I had overlooked the first time. My father, standing beside a woman I did not recognize, her hand resting on his arm in a way that was both familiar and forbidden. There was a child with them, tucked under her coat, and my pulse raced. The handwriting on the back simply said, "Oh, do not tell Margaret." I felt a cold knot of dread form in my stomach. My father had secrets beyond the ledger, beyond the letters, beyond even the child in my mother's photograph. My hands shook as I flipped through the corresponding envelope. Inside were documents, school records, adoption papers, legal forms, all with my father's meticulous signature. And in the corner of one form was a name I knew immediately, my brother John. I pressed the paper to my chest, struggling to breathe. It was him. And yet, not quite. Memories flooded me. I remembered my mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the floor for long stretches of time, her hands wringing a napkin, her lips trembling. I remembered John leaving for trips he never fully explained, returning late, haunted, distant. The pieces fell together with a terrible clarity. John wasn't just hiding childhood secrets. He had been protecting someone. And the child in the photographs wasn't a cousin, wasn't a family friend. It was a sibling I never knew I had. I sank to the floor, the letters and papers slipping through my trembling hands. Betrayal and sorrow coiled in my chest. I had spent years believing I knew the people I loved most, and now I realized that in every interaction, there had been invisible walls, silent warnings, hidden histories. I picked up the letters again, reading every word with the intensity of someone trying to catch fireflies in the dark. One note from my father made my breath catch. I did what I thought was best. I kept her safe, Margaret, but at a cost I will carry forever. She cannot know yet. You must understand, secrets protect, but they also wound. Protect, wound. The words echoed like a mantra, and in that moment, I understood the paradox of my family's love. It had been real, fierce, devoted, but also dangerous, layered with choices made under fear and uncertainty. I remembered calling John once, years ago, when he had seemed distant and troubled. I had accused him of lying about nothing, of withholding, of being cold. His voice had been strange, almost pained, when he said, "You wouldn't understand, Margaret. Some things you're not meant to know." Now I understood, and the understanding carried a sting sharper than any betrayal. I placed the documents back in the trunk, slowly, deliberately, as if the act could absorb some of the hurt. Then I opened the small box again, the one with the key-shaped pendant. My fingers trembled as I lifted it, feeling the cool metal against my palm. There was a folded note tucked beneath it, almost forgotten. I unfolded it, and my eyes widened. "Margaret, you are stronger than you realize. Love does not always come without secrets. Remember, forgiveness is the path to peace." I pressed the note to my heart, tears slipping down my cheeks. The weight of years of hidden lives, of choices I had never understood, it all settled around me like a storm finally breaking. And yet, even in the midst of this revelation, I felt an odd sense of relief. Knowing the truth, painful as it was a kind of freedom. I realized then that the ultimate secret was not simply who our family had hidden, but what every lie, every omission, every hushed conversation had been an attempt to protect, however flawed, however imperfect, and while it hurt, it also revealed something profound. Love is never simple, and family is never straightforward. It is messy, dangerous, beautiful, and tragic all at once. The next day I called my children, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I need you to know the truth," I said. Not all of it, but enough that you understand why certain things happened." They listened quietly, the gravity of my words settling over them. And for the first time, I felt the connection between past and present, between what had been hidden and what could now be shared. In the days that followed, I went through the trunk with careful precision, documenting, organizing, reflecting. Every photograph, every letter, every scrap of paper became a bridge between secrets and understanding, between love withheld and love expressed. And through it all, I began to forgive. Not because the choices had been easy, but because understanding allowed me to see the human hearts behind them. I remember sitting on the basement steps, the light from the window painting the dust in gold streaks. I held the key pendant in my hand, letting the cool metal press against my skin. I whispered to myself, to my parents, to the family I had just begun to understand. I forgive you. I forgive us. The basement was no longer a place of fear or secrecy. It had become a sanctuary of truth, a chamber where the weight of history could finally be acknowledged and released. And I realized that every family has shadows, some darker than others, but all of them shaped by love, by fear, and by the imperfect human heart. Later, I called my grandchildren into the living room. Their eyes were wide, curious, a little hesitant, sensing the weight in my voice. I shared the story, not every detail, but enough to understand the depth of our family, the importance of truth, and the courage it takes to face it. Emily isn't perfect, I told them, my hands resting on the old wooden table, knuckles white. We love, we hurt, we make mistakes. And sometimes those we love most are capable of keeping secrets. But the most important thing you can do is face the truth, forgive when you can, and carry the love forward. They nodded, absorbing every word. I could see in their faces a mixture of awe, understanding, and the kind of quiet contemplation that comes when you realize life is bigger and more complicated than you ever imagined. That night, I returned to the basement one last time. I closed the trunk gently, as if sealing not just the contents, but the years of pain, fear, and love it had contained. I placed the key pendant on top, a symbol of what I had uncovered and what I now understood, the endurance of family, the necessity of forgiveness, and the strength that comes from facing the past without flinching. I lit a single candle nearby, watching the flame dance across the walls, casting shadows that were no longer threatening but comforting, as if the house itself had acknowledged the truth and was finally at peace. I inhaled the scent of dust and cedar, of paper and memories, letting it anchor me in the moment. And in that quiet, reflective space, I realized the greatest lesson the trunk had taught me was not about betrayal or secrecy, but about resilience, about the capacity of the human heart to endure, to love, and to forgive. Life is messy and family is complicated, but we survive, we grow, and we find meaning in the connections that persist despite everything. It whispered into the stillness. This is the story of us, not just the laughter, not just the love, not just the pain, but the truth of it all. And now it is yours too? Carry it well. I turned off the light, letting the candle burn down, and walked upstairs. The house was quiet, but it felt alive in a new way, no longer a keeper of secrets, but a witness to honesty, courage, and enduring love. From that night on, the trunk remained in the basement, a silent sentinel of history, of choices, and of hearts that had loved imperfectly but wholly. And every time I glanced at it, I was reminded that understanding does not erase pain, but it allows for peace. Forgiveness does not erase mistakes, but it allows for freedom. And love, even when complicated and concealed, remains the most powerful force we carry. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the sunlight spill across the living room, and I felt the weight of the years lift slightly from my shoulders. The story was no longer mine alone. It belonged to all of us, the children, the grandchildren, the family who would continue after me. And in that shared truth, I found a deep and abiding calm. Because life is not about perfection. It is about courage. It is about truth. And it is about love, the kind that endures, even through secrets, even through betrayal, even through the years we cannot change. And now my family knows it too.